Good morning, everybody. My name is James Cummings. I'm a journalist with Times of Malta, and I'd like to warmly welcome you all to this business breakfast this morning. Today's event is hosted by Times of Malta in collaboration with the Malta Digital Innovation Authority, or MDIA, along with Malta Enterprise. And this morning's business breakfast is called EdTech, Education, Technology and Innovation. Just a reminder that we are live on Facebook this morning as well. So if you're watching from there, you're very welcome to give comments and questions. This morning we'll be talking about the role of technology in education, how it can empower students to learn more effectively and to grapple with new economic realities and opportunities. But before we kick off with the first of our two panel discussions, I'd like to invite the Minister for the Economy, Enterprise and Strategic Projects to give his opening address.
Good morning to all. Today I can see that we are full house here, and I was told that there were many more on the waiting list, which shows that how important the subject is and how important to have these type of meetings to discuss into more depth this subject. And that is why I'm honored to be here today to discuss this pivotal role of educational technology in shaping Malta's future. In an era defined by rapid technological advancement, embracing EdTech isn't just a choice. EdTech offers numerous benefits, including democratizing education and empowering educators with innovative tools. For Malta, embracing EdTech means seizing different economic opportunities and fostering education and innovation. By investing in infrastructure, fostering partnerships, and promoting digital literacy, Malta can create an environment conducive to EdTech innovation. The sector has already contributed to economic growth by integrating technology into traditional sectors and addressing skills gaps through training programs. Regulatory innovation authorities play a crucial role in fostering EdTech growth. Their effort, together with other entities and authorities such as Malta Enterprise and MCST, attract investment, talent, and expertise, positioning Malta as an important location for technological innovation in the Mediterranean region. Moreover, EdTech offers a plethora of economic opportunities for Malta. Let's take a look, for example, when it comes to job creation. The expanding of EdTech sector has the potential to generate a multitude of employment opportunities across various fields, such as software development, content creation, instructional design, and educational consulting. By nurturing a vibrant EdTech ecosystem, Malta can stimulate job creation, attract skilled professionals, and mitigate brain drain by providing fulfilling career prospects here domestically. If we look, for example, at the export then of educational services, we can see that EdTech opens the door to export of education services, allowing Maltese companies to offer innovative learning solutions to global markets. By leveraging our expertise in language education, e-learning platforms, and instructional technology, Malta here can establish itself as a leading exporter of EdTech products and services, therefore diversifying our economy further and boosting international trade. Obviously, another important topic for the subject where EdTech can assist is undoubtedly for SMEs and startups. Here, EdTech can provide a fertile ground for small and medium enterprises and startups to flourish. Through incubators, accelerators, and funding programs tailored to EdTech ventures, Malta can nurture a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem, fostering innovation, creativity, and job creation, whilst also bolstering the competitiveness of our economy. Then an important topic, especially in today's reality, is the subject of lifelong learning and reskilling. And obviously here, EdTech is very key. In an era of rapid technological disruption, lifelong learning and the continuous upskilling are imperative for workforce readiness and adaptability. EdTech platforms offer flexible, accessible, and cost-effective opportunities for individuals to acquire new skills, certifications, and qualifications which are aligned with emerging industry trends. By investing in EdTech enabled lifelong learning initiatives, Malta can enhance the employability of its workforce, stimulate economic productivity, and foster a culture of innovation and resilience. Ultimately, another important point for here in Malta is the attraction of foreign direct investment. Here, if we look at Malta's strategic position, and we can say that it is an important location for EdTech innovation and excellence, which can attract foreign investment from multinational corporations, venture capital firms, and EdTech startups, which are seeking to capitalize on our supportive regulatory environment, skilled workforce, and collaborative ecosystem. By fostering strategic partnerships and incentivizing investment in EdTech infrastructure and research, Malta can stimulate economic growth and enhance competitiveness. Establish itself as an important player in educational technology. In conclusion, and as we can see from what I have just said, the benefits of EdTech are manifold, extending far beyond the confines of the classroom to shape the future of our society and economy. As stewards of Malta's prosperity, it is incumbent upon us to embrace EdTech wholeheartedly, harnessing its potential to cultivate a skilled workforce, drive economic prosperity, and foster a culture of lifelong learning and innovation. Together, let us seize the opportunities afforded by EdTech and embark on a journey towards a brighter, more prosperous future for all the Maltese citizens. Today's event is one to be applauded, as here we are witnessing various entities from different sectors which are coming together to understand better a proactive way forward. Let this be an opportunity to drive forward the benefits of EdTech and come up with positive ideas to further enhance the Maltese ecosystem. Once again, thank you all. Thanks all to all entities involved and Times of Malta for organizing this event. And I wish you a fruitful discussion ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Before we start our first panel discussion, just a quick note to say that we will be doing Q's and A's after that and the following panel as well. So do keep that in mind if there's anything you'd like to raise or ask. I'm now going to invite our first panel up. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage the Director of the Digital Literacy and Transversal Skills Directorate, Neil Attard, Researcher, Strategist and Project Manager, Katerina Peterzak, Chief Officer of Innovative Technology at the MDIA, Jean-Marie Mifsud, and to moderate this discussion on technology, young people and innovation, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Centre for Connected Learning Foundation, Alex Gregg. Please welcome all four of them.
Thank you. Greetings. Friends, colleagues, former colleagues, people I haven't seen for ages. When Gavril and I started talking about doing this event, My first question was, is EdTech suddenly cool? Because it wasn't always cool. And I operate in this field. I've been operating in this field for the last 20 years or so. What do we mean by innovation? Why is it important to young people? This is a panel which is going to look at technology, young people, and innovation. Many of you guys and girls are parents of young people, Gen Z primarily, currently entering the workforce. Are we focusing too much or maybe too little on the so-called digital natives? People born after 1994. I want you to consider the following. One, media has long gone online. Any content on a screen, including this thing in your pocket, that's the media. This is what I teach at university. I teach new media, digital literacy skills. I speak to people whose lives are navigated via this thing over here. The education sector is currently struggling to catch up. There's a lot of mass hysteria at the moment about ChatGPTs, Gen Is. How can we assess things? Are people going to cheat? Loads of us now know that when a student submits an essay, you can see very easily that it's been generated by ChatGPT format. And yet, the first thing I told my students a while ago was, in the same way there was hysteria about the calculator several years ago, don't use it. We're going to have to find a way of navigating these tools and using these tools and putting them to good strategic use. So there's a lot of polarizing discourse at the moment about technology. What's good for you? What's bad for you? Information overloads, addiction to screens, Silicon Valley models, TikTok should be banned. I mean, even in my organization, we've written a whole manifesto about young people and information and what should we do with it. So the blame game, in a way, is in full swing and keeps the media, educators and regulators very busy. My suggestion is that focusing on the blame game at the moment helps nobody. So in this panel we're more interested in solutions, although with the current pace of change, we all need to invest in our learning to understand what's going on. When I mean investing in our learning, that means in the boardroom, in the schools, and in the home. So I'm hoping that our panelists here can look at some of these variables that may contribute maybe to a better life, a better future for young people. So I think focusing on education, technology, lifelong learning, the new labour market, whatever that means, the jobs that may be created because of AI, and the jobs that will disappear because of AI, maybe including education jobs, for all I know. What are we going to do about that? And what are the tech skills that young people need to have, that they need to secure to navigate and to thrive? So I think the way we want to do this right now is I want to first suggest that Katarina Petersak from the Research Institutes of Sweden, I think first gives us some insights on a totally different model to ours. I've spent quite a bit of time in Gothenburg in the labs working with people like Katarina and other PhDs over there who are deeply embedded with the labour market, with the technology sector, with unions and educators, and many a case around the same table. So, Katarina, over to you.
Thanks so much, Alex. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I work at this institute, which actually was like 36 institutes from the beginning, I think. All the governmental technical institutes in Sweden were merged into one. So we're doing everything from gasoline pump certifications till super advanced AI research, plenty of applied research. So I'm doing applied research in the field of lifelong learning. That is my everyday, and my unit's name is called Lifelong Learning, so it's kind of obliging for me to dig into these questions. And I've been working, we are the innovation partner of the labor market, of the Swedish industry. Maybe you have heard of Sweden, we are like the very tech country. We are very dense in unicorn companies, many startups, as we will dig into here. So we are working with those, but also with the public sector a lot, trying to understand what lifelong learning has to be today. And it has changed quite a lot. I've been working with the Swedish EdTech industry a lot. We went through on tours over the world to see how do they do this in the US, how do they do this in Hong Kong, how do they do this in China. So I've been trying to understand and explore and discover this field for kind of many years now. And my part of this world is often called like the soft skills of it, which I have kind of a crusade against, because the soft skills are often like dismissed as the thing that comes after the tech thing. And what we can see when I'm in quite big research projects, together with the academia, together with the companies, with the labor market, trying to gain these insights, how do we learn when we work? How do we accomplish this workplace learning that we really need because the world is changing so fast? Then I can see that those soft skills are like the 21st century skills. They are crucial. So when I do research, it's okay, so we have these platforms, we have this EdTech technology, we have to go with this development, as you said, Alex. But how do we make sure that people actually learn from that journey? How do we motivate the labor force to go into this development? I, for example, conducted one big project with the manufacturing industry in Sweden that we got the group of operators in factories, and they have to go into this green transition. We are electrifying, you know, all of that development. And they were considered like hopeless. They don't want to learn, they don't know how to learn, they're not educated. And when we got into that research, we of course discovered that that wasn't the case. They were just not trained to learn. They were not invited to be motivated to learn. So those kind of soft skills are my everyday work. But then I also try to understand, for me, learning and lifelong learning, it's a capacity. It's kind of a muscle that you have to train, and you can use all of this technology to understand it more and to train it better, because we have to do that. And me and my colleagues are maybe not looking into platform as much as how do we create like immersive learning experiences through tech, through XR, extended reality, for one example. That is one thing that we are exploring a lot. How can we make learning more both tangible and accessible by tech? How can we invite more people by tech? So that capacity for me is something to hold by hand in this time of super hard driving forces, the digitalization, the AI development, everything that is changing our society so much that we can't even grasp what we are going into. So I brought a picture that we maybe could show on the screens, and those of you in the back won't see anything, so we'll be happy to send it to you afterwards. But it's a graph that I took with me on a slide that I've been like studying a lot lately, because it showed that we are in this paradigm shift, and you almost get tired from hearing that again and again, but we really are. There are very many signs that are showing that we really are in this paradigm shift. Where we cannot anticipate what we are going into. It's a complete new world, and we cannot know what is a university in like 15, 20 years. What is an institution? What is a company? How do we work? We know that the pandemic changed a lot, but that we can grasp. But what we are going into, what kind of world this AI world will form for us, we cannot even picture. So how do you plan for that? How do you make like strategic plans for that kind of a change? Well, we really can't do it, but we have to keep walking. So that is what I've been trying to understand. How does this transition look? And how can we use lifelong learning to train this capacity, to be able to make people come on board, really learn from it? We discussed at the table, one of the most common questions I get is, how do we measure the learning? And we do have like KPIs that come from other business contexts and from other kind of learning stuff that we have been measuring. And we have been measuring things that are easy to measure. Like how many people went to this education? How many clicks did we get on that course? How many learning platforms do we have? We can measure that, but that won't tell us actually if people really learned. And if we want this effect, if we want this new world and transition to give us something, to make the world the one we want in these AI times, then we need to make sure that this effect is there, that people really learn from what we ask them to. So this is kind of the stuff that we are doing. I'm also involved in a project called Learning How to Learn. So we have like psychologists, academic researchers that are trying to find the driving forces for learning. And we can see, for example, that the inner driving forces are really important, that we can give people badges and certificates and degrees and like better salaries on their jobs, but that won't create lifelong learning for like sustainable time ahead. We have to find people's motivation and lifelong inner driving forces as well. And then on the other hand, I worked with like marginalized kids that have not accessibility to either tech, high-tech level, or education systems. They might live in outcast areas, they might have come to Sweden from other countries, and we're trying to provide them with both new ways of learning and succeeding in the learning environment, which they don't in the usual school, and then also providing a really high tech level for them to see if they can like take on this societal change by that. So yeah, that's kind of what I do in my working days.
Okay, so the obvious question in the back of my mind is, again, I'm going to turn to Jean first. In terms of, does any of this resonate with us within the Malta context?
Yes, I think what Katarina has been describing can easily be related to our experience in Malta as well. Because in her speech, in her comment, Katarina referred to two groups of people: those who are driving innovation, the people who can develop AR systems, etc., and users. For example, in your case, you mentioned the users in the factory, and you are going to try to teach them how to use AR, but are they motivated to do that? And I think anywhere you look around the world, you're going to find the same two groups of people who, in one way or another, depend on each other. Because we need to acknowledge that innovation, at the end of the day, is not about having a researcher and finishing a product and he gets this feel-good factor because he managed to invent something. Innovation is about creating something that will make a difference to society. And the only way how innovation will actually have an impact is if society knows how to use that innovation in its everyday to-day life. So without user acceptance, we won't even have the impact we are looking for. And I think at MDIA, for us that's very important. In fact, our vision is to foster trust in innovation, because we understand that you can stimulate innovation, you can fund research, you can say I have X amount of PhD holders and most of them, and this percentage of them, we're focusing on AI, etc. But what we actually need is to see those digital innovations part of our day-to-day life, not just on the workplace, at the workplace, but even every citizen using them. And lifelong learning is necessary because those who will resist, if we don't make it easy for people to come on board and learn new things, they will lag behind. Because, as you mentioned, Gen Z, etc., they are digital natives, they are willing to adopt these systems. So in 10 years, 20 years' time, you're going to have a clear distinction between Gen Z, who are no longer new to the workforce, and those who are older, like me and even older. So it's important that when we look at lifelong learning and innovation, we keep in mind the end user and how to motivate the end user by promoting that this is, at the end of the day, will change the way we do things altogether for the best, because that's the goal.
Okay. Neil has one of the most difficult jobs in Malta. He's the director of digital literacy, whatever that means, though I teach it, and transversal skills, which are easily misunderstood, but are much needed. So Neil, how do you react to what you've just heard?
So, first of all, it's nice meeting you, Alex, after all those Zoom meetings we had from...
He's taller than I thought he was, that's for sure.
Yes, for us, innovation, I think, is the introduction of new technologies, new software, new devices, in order to bring about greater good within schools. You mentioned ChatGPT. Is EdTech suddenly cool, and are students are our students cheating nowadays? I mean, we have lesson plans where we reverse engineer AI. So, for example, when we know that a kid or a student used ChatGPT for his homework, we then speak to him at school. What questions would you ask to bring about this answer? And that makes the student read the answer again. And he's actually thinking in a way like, listen, okay, now I have to read this by force, so I didn't just press enter. And I have to analyze it using transversal skills. That's why we're digital literacy and transversal skills. And you make them ask questions. Think critically. Perhaps what question would you have asked to get this question? What other questions would you ask?
I have a bit of an issue because I teach anything from 19-year-olds to 70-year-olds. And my feeling is that by the time I meet people aged 19, the damage has been done. They're not critical. They're not asking questions. Yesterday, Katerina joined me at university for a lecture with my students. And it's always very difficult to get people to be brave enough to ask questions. And I'm not quite sure that our education system right now encourages young people to ask questions. Now, for many years here in this country, we've been trying to get away from the so-called one-size-fits-all system. Whether we've been successful or not is another issue. And that's why I said you've got one of the most difficult jobs. I want to push it a bit more because these buzzwords, these terms, digital literacies, the other buzzword is innovation. So I'm going to ask people again, from the panelists, what do they mean by the big ones, lifelong learning, digital literacies, innovation, and specifically what skill sets do young people need, we think, to navigate innovation? And how do you see innovation impacting both the education sector and the workspace or the labour market? Now, it's a bit of a loaded question, but answers on a postcard. Do you want to go in first? Yeah.
Me?
Katerina, why don't you go?
So many questions. Which one
Yes.
to start with? Coming from the media, I can choose one now. No, but we had this definition of innovation in Sweden. I think it's like something new, making new things possible and being used, as you said. So that it would be like the formal definition. And then it's a buzzword together with lifelong learning and competence, whatever, development and such stuff. So I quite often ask people, like you do now, what do we mean? And for me, lifelong learning has become like, when I'm like in my most human mode, I say it's becoming a human. It's like you become who you are through the lifelong learning. But when I get asked, what do you see the potential to improve this lifelong learning in systems, in structures, in culture, in mindset? Then I say that we have to visualize the learning always going on, like the informal learning. We have to take advantage of that. We have to use it. We have to talk about it in the labor market. We have to structure for it. We have to organize places where that could happen. But we also have to change the design for the formal learning, as you were speaking about, Alex. Because that design is designed for another time, for another era, for other needs, one size fits all, the design in a classroom. I was not surprised that it was hard to get people to ask questions yesterday among the students, because that design always creates that kind of a feeling. I mean, just putting people in smaller groups could change that kind of a thing, but the design is so much, you can do so much more with the design of education, and that goes for courses on EdTech platforms as well, because we copied everything from the school system. Pedagogy means for kids. Peda means for kids. And we are talking about pedagogical learning for adults. There's another word for that, andragogy. But so we need to change that design in very many ways if we want these effects that I was talking about in the beginning. So that is also a struggle, I think, in this time.
Okay, Neil.
If I may add, you mentioned that we need to change the design. I mean, two days ago we launched our digital strategy. And basically, the biggest issue that we saw throughout all the months of research, conducting workshops internally, both externally, is how are we going to start teaching digital literacy? And we thought of, listen, let's come up with a lesson once a week, but at the end of the day, first of all, if you had to do that, you'd have to change the whole curriculum. And okay, I won't start mentioning unions and everything. So basically the way that we went about that is we started looking at the learning outcomes of each and every subject. How are we going to start teaching maths in a more digital way? How are we going to teach English in a more digital way? And this is where EdTech comes in, basically. We start conducting these pilot projects. We've had one with MDIA, and we worked with Professor Alexei Dingley, where it's basically AI in maths. The teacher has a live dashboard. She can see where the student has stopped, which are the high performers, and she can then directly send questions to them. For example, if she sees that John is stuck on question 2, she will send another question to him to get him up to the rest. And we had presented this to the union. They want to open it up to more subjects, basically. And teachers are afraid because AI, they think that AI is going to take over. AI is not going to replace teachers. AI is going to replace teachers that do not use AI. At the end of the day, and I mean, yeah.
G, staying with the education, I want to dive into the innovation thing because again, you know, we use many of these terms. Ecosystem, nobody knows what an ecosystem is. Okay, so innovation, and you're in the business of innovation. How does innovation in education, how does it dovetail at the moment?
Well, as Katerina explained, innovation is about finding new ways how to do something. Resulting in augmenting the product or services offered, improving productivity or decreasing costs. So there's a goal at the end of the day. And as I stated in my previous intervention, it's about, for me, when I'm looking at skills, I think it's important to distinguish between the two groups. Those who are driving the innovation and those that will use the product. The people who will create new things, innovate, they need to have skills such as critical thinking, the ability to observe and notice problems and gaps, because in doing so, actually identifying a problem is an opportunity. That is where you have room for growth and new solutions. The ability to be creative. It's very important to know the theory behind the digital innovation, the theory behind AI, the theory behind quantum computing, but theory is not enough. You need to think outside the box to actually use the theory and invent something. And when it comes to innovation as well, I think it's also important if one has an entrepreneurial mindset. The ability to be a risk taker and the ability to find a balance between thinking and doing. Because if one spends too much time thinking, then that person has missed an opportunity. It's a very tricky balance there. And in our case, it's very important when it comes to new technology, ethical awareness. Knowing that what you're developing needs to be ethical, respect certain rights, social impact, environmental impact. So this is what I think is important when it comes to those people who are driving innovation. But then we have the users, as I said. And each and every one of us in this room is going to be an end user of a number of new innovative tools. But we can only use them if, and only if, we know how to use them. And therefore, I think this is very important when it comes to lifelong learning. Why? Because I think innovators they find it natural for them to keep abreast with what's going on, because it is part of who they are. They have the skill set, they constantly thinking, they're constantly questioning things, so they want to keep up. But when it comes to the users, that's where we have the wrong impression that, okay, I've completed my education, now I have a job, now I have a salary, and that's it. I don't need to do anything more, it's just going to be a repetition day in, day out of the same thing. but it's not the case. And we, as a society, in reality, we have adapted a lot. I mean, the uptake of mobile, the use of social media, it's not just Gen Z who use social media in Malta. There's a lot of...
Old people like me.
No, not necessarily.
I'm 62 years old and I teach digital literacy. Part of the final generation that remembers the life pre-internet and post-internet. And this is something which I'm very passionate about, because this whole thing about digital natives, which was a term coined by a guy called Mark Brensky a while ago, is something I don't really buy into, you see. Because I actually happened, I'll remember my favorite story, okay? My 94-year-old father-in-law in England is a pilot. His body is disintegrating. But he does ride a mobility scooter with Bluetooth speakers. And he makes sure that they're very loud when he doesn't want to meet his neighbors. So I think, again, this is one of the things that I think we just need to be slightly careful about, I think. And I think I could see that you wanted to jump in. Not that I disagree with you, because I think you mentioned something that's really valuable. You mentioned ethics, which I think we haven't even looked at right now. And I think Katrina wanted to jump in, and I think
yeah, because you mentioned risk-taking and the entrepreneurial mindset and what you have to, and I totally agree. And we have such huge global challenges to solve. I mean, the digitalization is driving this development, but also like the climate change and all of that. So we have to have this. But again, coming back to the 21st century skills and the design, does the educational system promote this? Do we promote risk-taking? Do we train from the beginning people to take those risks? No, we don't. So that is how it's connected for me, because we have to do, and I totally agree also with you, like we have to do this integrated with everything. We cannot have it as a sidetrack. We have to do, actually in Sweden it's really interesting, this innovative country of Spotify and Klarna payment systems and all of those services. We are actually in school now backing this development. I mean, taking steps back. We don't want digitalization in schools. Well, by we, I mean the Swedish government. So, because it's harmful for the learning and so on. So that's also really interesting what happens when you start taking these risks. What happens then in our former structure.
So you're saying resistance, pushback against too much technology, right? Now again, going back to the whole parenting thing, okay? I mean, I've seen many new generations of parents, who think that the best thing to do with a kid aged 4 is dump them in front of a tablet. That keeps them quiet, doesn't it? That's called new parenting now. We haven't talked about misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, which are going to happen now. It's not just Taylor Swift, or, I don't know, Rishi Sunak, that you can put words into his or mouth or whatever it is. That's the brave new world we're going into right now. And I want to keep on going on about this thing about good for you, bad for you. Because I think if Malta's going to get an edge in this, and I still deeply believe in Malta as an island lab, as in doing some things first and sometimes better than other people, because of the various components that we have here, okay? Proximity to decision makers, being able to take decisions quickly. I still deeply believe in that. But we need to be also aware of the fact, like you say, that in Sweden, and I felt it too in Sweden, this pushback against technology. Some people saying go back to books. No, I think.
Yeah, very much so.
Bjorn was telling me. So I want to dive in a bit more about how education fits into this innovation system. And I really want to go back to starting with Neil. I mean, I still get the impression that teachers in schools might perceive EdTech as something extra or something irrelevant. I mean, so again, you said you're working on your digital education strategy. Specifically, how can you get buy-in from people in the trenches first, the teachers, and more importantly, the parents, who sometimes actually think that keeping the education system as it is, it's good, because it's a form of discipline.
I mean, this goes back to the strategy that I spoke about before. I mean, the way we work as a directorate is we have a primary team, we have a secondary team, and we have support teachers and heads of department at our directorate. And what we do is go out to schools. We train trainers, like instead of, for example, they meet a biology teacher. Instead of going to the lab and dissecting a heart, you can use a VR headset. You can dissect a heart using Class VR, for example. And sometimes, I'm not generalizing here, but over the past couple of years, I've only been there for a year, but from what I've heard, from the feedback that I've gathered from my teachers, from my team who are here with me, is that sometimes we go to school and the teacher tells us, no, this is not in the curriculum, this is a waste of time. Please, they see us as sometimes, not all the time, where, do you remember, Alex, when we used to go to school and we used to see the teacher coming in with a television and everyone starts clapping, okay, this is a free lesson now.
Yeah.
No, it shouldn't be like that. So, they might see us as extra, but it is not extra at all. I mean, apart from the fact that we are bound by EU targets, that by 2030, 80% need to be digital literate. They need to have basic digital skills. How are you going to give them these digital skills? You need to have a strategy in place. You need to improve resources. You need to empower teachers. You need to get feedback from the parents, from students. You need to have these conversations. That's why the strategy right now is open till end of June, till the 28th of June. And I invite each and every one of you to give your feedback. We'll also have a seminar where we'll invite people to. And we're going to go about this because digital literacy is always seen as something extra. It is not. We need to start. I hate to use the word enforcing it, but you need to do that sometimes to introduce it within schools, and I think it's about time.
Jean, going to add to that?
Yes, at MDIA we are constantly looking at innovation from various aspects, because obviously we look at it from the policy making aspect, regulation, etc. But I think I would like to focus on the European Digital Innovation Hub. So MDIA hosts Malta's European Digital Innovation Hub, DHUB-MT. In setting up Malta's EDIH, Malta joined a network of EDIHs. So this network is the result of an initiative by the European Commission. And the idea is that an EDIH serves as a one-stop shop that stimulates and speeds up the uptake of digital transformation within the European Union. And how do we do that? What is the role of an EDIH in this aspect? So first, there's the technical support, providing access to laboratories and experts which can assist from a technical perspective. And we are working on that. We have set up an IoT lab. We are looking into having an HPC, 3D printing, robotics, etc. And then there's also business-related assistance, because you can have a group of people, an innovator who is very good when it comes to the technical aspect, but doesn't know how to actually take the product to market, develop a good business plan, etc. So we have assistance when it comes to business-related matters. We also focus on networking opportunities, because in this aspect it's very important to link people together, innovators with investors, etc. And finally, but equally important, the role of an EDIH is to support the workforce reskilling. And I think this is why I want to mention, because in this aspect, MDIA has, through the EDIH, through the DHUB-MT, is focusing on making sure that our workforce has the relevant skills. So we're not just trying to stimulate innovation, but we're also trying to make sure that there's the uptake of innovation from the wider society.
Did you want to jump in, Katerina, at some stage, or are you just nodding? No.
If perhaps I could jump in.
Yes.
I would like to continue talking perhaps more about EdTech and...
I want to talk about critical thinking too,
yeah.
which we're not talking about.
Yeah,
and I want to talk about. Okay, so obviously...
yes, if I could mention, for example, one example that we are doing with EdTech when it comes to schools. I had spoken to a geography teacher to come up with 2 double lessons where the students always fail. And she told me, I have the perfect example for you. We take our students to Ardalam to teach them about the crust of the earth, to show them the sinkholes, what a stalactite is, what a stalagmite is. So they're wasting a whole day catching buses, going there. And according to this teacher, it isn't even the best example to show students, because half of it is closed down. Some things might not show there. So we've approached an EdTech startup Taylor, who's here in the audience, he's the founder of Accent Park, where we told him, listen, you've created your own metaverse. Why not create this virtual cave where students can go in, have an AI tutor, teach them what a sinkhole is, what a stalagmite is, and they can have the exam there. Not only are you being more efficient with time, kids are more motivated, they will see it as perhaps a game. I hate using the word game because it's not a game, but I mean, we see the reaction of students when we go in class with a VR headset, with a reader, with a, you know, these robots that we use. And it's proving to be more effective than traditional means of learning. And that's why EdTech is super important. That's why we are running these pilot projects with EdTech startups within our schools.
I keep on mentioning this word critical thinking because it's another famous buzzword, yeah? Where do you learn critical thinking? At home? How do you know what's right and what's wrong? How do you know what are facts? How do you know what lies? Soon the whole idea about fake news is going to come back into vogue, I suspect, very soon. Now with AI, one of the challenges we're all going to have is an education was supposed to be about facts, knowledge, empowerment and things like that. I'm just not putting a spoke in the wheels. And I'm not saying it's easy to do all of the innovation stuff that we're talking about now. One of my hopes is that we do start to address something which I think in Sweden you do start to address, that from a young age, if we're getting kids to be in front of screens, we also start to discuss the fact that what's on a screen is not necessarily real or truthful. And again, I don't know if this is going to become the business of parents. So do we now need to educate the parents? Which is my bugbear about, we always talk in terms of innovation, in terms of young people, no? The older people are supposed to go into the sunset and just go sailing or something like that. And yet that's one of the real issues. So I'm just putting this as a fragment, and I know there's some stuff happening in Sweden. Okay, so I don't know whether you want to dive in and then we can...
No, but I was thinking when you were talking, Neil, about this, I'll get back to that, Alex. I know that you want that. And I'm also a trained journalist, so this has been like my training to critically think. But I think what you're describing is kind of connected to that. Like 6 or 7 years ago, I was in Corinthia Park, like the Apple headquarters in San Francisco, and we got to see such cool EdTech. It was like, I mean, there were like almost holograms, and it was like you could go into the veins, into the lungs for a biology teacher. It was
using
like
Minecraft too.
Yeah, exactly.
Trains using veins and...
It was these Apple wizards walking around, and that's the designer of all voice control on Apple. It was super cool. I was dazzled. And I was also kind of super sad that why don't we use this at school? And why? Because that creates kind of a feeling of meaningfulness. This is meaningful. I understand. And now suddenly I understand why I have to learn about how the lungs are functioning or whatever. My husband is a teacher. The most common question he's getting is, why do I have to learn this? So they lack this meaningfulness. Okay, so without that meaningfulness, how can you even start asking the right questions of what you're learning? How can you be critical? Do I need this? Don't I need this? Are you encouraged to be critical of your education so that you can be? And yes, we have had more like training of that. I just told you that my 15-year-old daughter had her national English test this week, and one part of it was like critical thinking sources in English, and that is in every subject. So we have like integrated that in many ways, but very theoretically, not like how are you critical on TikTok. They are totally left alone in that space. So I would say, yeah, this is connected to the meaningfulness, because if we leave them to feel that the meaningfulness is happening on TikTok or wherever, and in school it's just like the obliging, boring stuff, then we won't ever have seize the potential that I did see there in Apple headquarters and that you were talking about.
And yet, TikTok is the most important thing in people's pockets. Yeah? So whether the US tries to ban TikTok or not, that's what most people are performing on. And that's what all the mainstream media, politicians, everybody's there right now. And I don't know if TikTok's going to be around in 10 years' time. I remember Vine before it, and that disappeared, so these things come and these things go. I think for a moment we should just stop a bit before getting too obsessed about the shiny things, though. And we were meant to focus on young people, which none of us are. And I am concerned. I've never dealt with so many people who tell me that they have mental health issues. There was an example yesterday during my class, okay? It's de rigueur now. Many of my students tell me that it is related to social media, it is related to performance. I have a 22-year-old son who tells me, you're lucky, you guys, you old guys, used to be able to go out and have a party, maybe even get drunk. Nobody was filming you. Okay? So we have to take care of these things. That's also going to have to be part of the education that we're in, okay? So in the same way that Katerina started by saying we don't know what we're unleashing with AI, I think as good responsible educators, innovators, we need to find a way that if we're going to position Malta as at the epicenter of these things, being able to actually converse about this rather than saying it's all good for you is really important and will give us a cutting edge, I think. Neil, I think you wanted to jump in again, because it's all education stuff.
Yes. I think your initial question was how to teach kids to think more
critically.
Just to give you an example, our support teachers use robots and maths when it comes to that. So I'm going to talk about shiny things here.
Yeah, it's okay.
If it's all right. Where basically they need to get from point A to point B, and they have some obstacles, in between. When they realize that the code that they gave that robot did not manage to go there, they stop and think. They go through the code again, and it's debugging in a way. They look at the code critically and say, okay, if I put left here and reverse here, then I can get to that point. So, we're teaching kids to think that way through digital methods from a very, very young age. So that's one thing that we are doing from our end. So,
dive in.
Yes. You are referring to risks here. You're mentioning risks that come with digital innovation. Obviously, we cannot just focus on the good things, on the possibilities, on the things that will drive us to actually learn how to use things because they are beneficial to us, but we also need to focus on the risks. And linked with that, then you mentioned critical thinking. And I would like to highlight that in order to stimulate critical thinking, you need to influence critical thinking with the thoughts you put out there, the food for thought. And at the authority, at MDIA, we are not we don't have an education role like Neil has. We have a very different role. But still, we take it upon us. We have a commitment to raise awareness on risks, because in doing so, we are providing food for thought for our society. In fact, recently we have launched an information campaign to reach the wider society. We're using very simple means, social media platforms with simple videos that can raise awareness, and in doing so, people can then start asking questions. So I think we cannot expect society to start asking questions on its own. We have to put the thoughts out there on what the risks are, and that will automatically then people will start building, because they become aware. Even for example, a simple item, posting your picture online when you're abroad. Are there risks related to it? It depends. Can anyone see your picture, or just limited people who you trust? So these are simple topics, but if we don't put them out there, we don't raise awareness, then people will not be thinking of these things.
I think my concern at the moment is this. Because I teach 19-year-olds, and we talk about risks and critical thinking and things like that, this is the normal gesture I get from 19-year-olds, right? When I start talking about information disconnects, whatever it's like. Move on. We know this. And then after a while, I get this one. I'm not the problem. It's my 11-year-old sister who's trying to get on TikTok at the moment. And she's twerking. Just to give you a reality check, okay? That's what it is. Every single generation I find, the 21-year-olds say they've got it, but the 19-year-olds haven't got it. The 19-year-olds say that it's the younger people who haven't got it. So somebody hasn't got it. But I repeat, those of you who are parents, and whether they're negotiating with people with mental health issues, or people saying, I'm performing, or as somebody came up to me and told me, day one, I do social media. Or what do you do? Well, I was on a famous TV program, and I'm making money. And what do you have to teach me? Maybe that's the so-called innovator, entrepreneur, that we want to encourage. Maybe the startups I think you have in mind might be doing something else. All I know, there's some critical factor now. The EU has been trying for many years to do these things called digital competencies. Digital competence frameworks. I spent many years going up and down Brussels and Rue Joseph II over there, talking about IT and innovation. It's easier to look at the KPIs, what you said are the shiny things. It's much more difficult to measure competencies which are related to being able to think sideways. And I still think it's an obligation on the state of the innovators to also promote that kind of thing. Katrina started by talking about soft skills, and he said, yeah, I remember what she said.
I hate that.
And I hate that too. I think there's essential skills. It's understanding what's right and wrong. How do you teach kids to understand opportunities if they're going to become entrepreneurs? How do you know this is an opportunity and go for it? And I know the Maltese people, those of us who went away, we always do very well abroad. Why? Because it's hard here. You come from a small place, okay, and you get it. How do we teach that, though, for people who decide to stay here and do something with the country? And this is the kind of things which I think are always at the back of my mind. So these kind of disconnects, are these incentives, are hubs, are boot camps, and startup incentives the answer? Maybe how do we debunk also some of these myths that we have? Because I repeat, we can as a country, and maybe like Sweden has, throw a lot of money into this, and we need a return from our investment. How are we going to do this? So, Katrina, I don't know if you want to bring in some Swedish context into this, and I know these may be open-ended questions. At the very beginning, we said, we don't know where AI is going. Anybody who tells you this is the part where you laugh at the moment. If Elon Musk is telling you, we're going to get, I don't know, technology will be better than human beings in 5 years' time, the other guy says it's in 10 years' time. Okay? So we're in this kind of brave new world situation. So, any comments?
I don't know. I don't have any solutions from Sweden, since I said we have this pushback at the moment, and we are a bunch of people, researchers and other people that are asking really how should we then get the kids and everyone into this digital literacy kind of world if we are rolling it back. We cannot pretend it's not there, but I think we really, the Swedish educational system has been really proud of itself because we provide something for everyone. We have vocational training, universities, colleges, private trainings, institutes, and we have something for everyone, but you're totally left alone to navigate in that system. It's like a spaghetti of opportunities, and it's not up to date, and it's not connected. So that is one thing that I'm thinking a lot about. How can we support the old structures that I was talking about from the old times, created and designed for old times? How can we support that to, as you were saying, together with unions and others, to change, to tweak, to start doing it, and maybe some radical innovation as well to really change it. But then I think we have to be connected like this. We have to be speaking over disciplinaries, over sectors, to even have a chance to grasp this world. I really think that. And I think that we cannot be... I saw a really great clip the other day. It said, the darkness is not here to scare us. It was about the war situation in Europe. But the darkness is not here to scare us, it's here to make us great. And I think it's the same here. My dark days, I think this cannot be changed because it's too hard of a structure. But my bright days, I think, okay, this is here to make us great, once in a 400 years great. We have to really take a leap now to be able to enhance all this.
We may have to take some questions. I just want to pivot to one final thing. Young people, EdTech, innovation, and then the other thing called lifelong learning. And young people. Lifelong learning in this country is associated with adult education. It's what you do after you fall off the bandwagon of university. In other words, we still got systems in place in many countries that you're supposed to go to university, get your funny hat there, like we all did, and then you're supposed to be set for life, right? And then you have to disconnect with the labour market when these guys suddenly said, what do I do with these guys? And there are many registered issues at the moment with Gen Z entering the workforce, older people like my generation, the boomers, the Gen X's. The disconnects I'm talking to you about are very real. And I'm just wondering whether instead of, sometimes we should really focus on this whole thing about lifelong learning. Because it's a bit more nuanced, that if we get away from concepts and away from these ecosystems, we may find some better answers. We all know we're talking about technology is going to take away jobs. People are going to have to learn new skills. The idea of a career, the same career for all your life, I think is something which we may have to forget, in the same way that you're saying we need to train people to be entrepreneurial from as an early age. How do we do that? I suggest, and I've used this in many discussions in the EU. The EU tends to work in silos, by the way. DG Connect, DG EIT, DG Employment, that does not talk to the other guys. When you start talking about lifelong learning, you see the whole barriers fall down. Because you start telling them, do you mean that if I have to stop learning? So if I retire, am I supposed to stop learning? Or if I'm 40 years old and I'm made redundant, I have to stop learning. And I suggest that there is something which can really be done, I think, in Malta, to start banging this drum about the permeability. And I know we have a very rigorous, one-size-fits-all education system. Everybody to blame, nobody to blame. It's there. And trust me, I know. I teach these kids. So I'm just wondering, because the relationship between technology and society is more complex than ever, what's lifelong learning got to do with this? Have I got it wrong? Can we envisage what learning might look like in the future? Do people learn more from YouTube and TikTok now than from coming to my lectures? From a culture and design perspective, what learning systems do we need that really support, motivate, and enhance lifelong learning that we need to create for innovation? So, any final thoughts on that, and then we can open this to any questions we may have. And if it's stunned silence, it's fine.
I could try.
Yeah.
No, but I totally agree with you that this could be like the transversal thing, like lifelong learning. It's the same in our country. It's like lifelong learning is anything but school or educational system. And for me, that gap is troublesome. When we measure, like the authorities ask students and pupils in school, does school make you want to learn more? Does it motivate you to learn more? And those numbers are constantly decreasing. And then they come into the society and you say, you have to think for yourself, be innovative, take risks, learn more, learn all your life. That is hard when you're not trained to do that. And I think that gap has to be bridged, and also we have to think about what is a lifelong learning, as I was saying in the beginning. It's not only like if you go on retirement, you also go to courses. But how do you have this environment and this culture of we need this learning to be innovative, to be able to take these leaps, these radical leaps that I was talking about? How do we create a culture that learning is really the thing, the approach to have to all of that, and not an add-on, as you said, like something extra, something you do. We have this, we divided this once. We divided learning and work. When we were ready. I have a friend who is a musician, like for a professional, and he said all his mates in the orchestra where he plays really one of Sweden's best orchestras, they are like done. They're like, should I have to learn more? I practiced in the Royal Music High School and now I'm done. So do you think that I have to learn all my life? Why? That kind of a mindset, we have to work with that on a societal level as well as in the labor market and in the schools, and it's a lifelong job and struggle, I would say.
Jean.
In my opinion, lifelong learning is a means to be able to adapt to the changes around us. because changes are inevitable. No one single person can stop changes, the changes that are coming. So the question is, how do we reach the people to help them continue their lifelong learning journey? And I think it's important that we seek to accommodate different lifestyles. When we think of education, we usually think of students, and students, their life revolves around education. They wake up in the morning, they go to school. Everything about their day, most of the time, is related to education. But when we talk about adults, we need to acknowledge that adults are busy with family, work, and a long list of other matters that can be a hurdle to actually stop and learn. Find the time to learn. So we need to focus on ways how to accommodate the fact that different age groups are facing different challenges. When you have a person who's not yet retired, they are challenged with work. Most of their day is consumed with work. When you have a person who is retired, there are different challenges that could be fear. Should I learn something new? Is it for me? Why should I even put myself out there? But I think in Malta we have to recognize that even the older generations, they have shown certain willingness to adapt. Most of their generations, they do have a mobile, they do have a social media account, and they are actually frequent users of social media platforms. And I think that is an advantage, because that means that we have a way how to reach different generations, raise awareness, as I said previously. So we leave food for thought out there, which will then they can build upon and think further on. And we can also maybe take the opportunity, since we do very well in the DES index. So households are quite well connected when it comes to internet connectivity, etc. So we can use that to our advantage and provide, if necessary, remote online courses. But I think it's also important to prioritize lifelong learning and incentivize employers to invest in the lifelong learning of their employees, and not to force employees to continue their lifelong learning journey after work, because that is where people are spending most of their time. And I think when we promote digital innovation and the skills necessary to use digital innovation on the workplace, that is where we're actually promoting the why we're doing it. We have this new system in place because this will make your work-life experience better. For example, AR technology can be used to improve certain maintenance in factory plants, for example. So it is a tool for people to have a better work-life experience. And instead of focusing on the fear that I'm going to end up without a job, focusing on the benefit.
Neil, why don't you do a final thought?
Yes, if I may add something on lifelong learning. The way I see it is that some people think that motivation to continue learning stops at university, just as you said. And we're always struggling to introduce new stuff to our younger students. And I think it should go beyond that. Are we looking at how we should be improving digital resources for our elderly students, those leaving university? I might be saying something against myself here, because we focus more on the primary and secondary thing. I mean, all these initiatives that we're doing within schools, could it be extended perhaps to beyond that? We always strive to keep our young students motivated. Where is the motivation going to these people? Do they actually have it?
I haven't said anything about what I do in my other life, which is like this 3CL thing. Because you said it. You guys are dealing with compulsory education. One of the things we learned is use technology to connect people to learning. I know something, you know something, we just happen to be in different parts of the world. Can we collaborate together? Can we use the tools which are readily available to us and put them to good use? For example, here's a conference here, right? It's being filmed, maybe, I hope. Somebody should transcribe some of the things that you hear. Some other people may listen to something. Some people will connect, will network. It's not just the network which happens on the table. It's a way of, connecting with like-minded people, even if they do not happen to be outside your door. I spend most of my time, based in Sydney sometimes, speaking to people on the other side of the planet. That's one of the great things about technology, I think. But we need to have a generation that is used to doing that. Okay. So, are there any questions?
Do we have any questions? Guys, if you'd like to put your hands up. No, yes?
Down there.
One, two. When you are asking a question, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself, the company you're from, and to keep your intervention as brief as possible. Thank you.
Hello, I am Emma Muscat. I'm a 17-year-old, and I'd like to add to the point that you said that those under the age of 19 lack critical thinking skills as the damage has already been done. I would like to just ask about the ethical concerns in development of AI, since I believe that it is important to understand how AI is affecting us. So I would like to just ask what is being done to tackle these ethical concerns, such as biases in the historical data sets, which exaggerate the social inequalities, liability issues when incorrect information is fed to the user, and privacy issues, such as where our information is being stored when we input it into the technologies. Thank you.
I wish I had an answer to that, but I think it's a great question. And that's kind of the great questions that we're trying to answer, actually, with the kind of work that I'm doing. And I'm seeing Karen here jumping up and down. So, yes, Professor Karen Elliott on this side, okay, who may have an answer for you, for all I know.
I don't have to stand up, do I?
No, you don't.
So I'm Professor Karen Elliott from the University of Birmingham, Professor in Finance and FinTech, but also a data ethicist and very concerned with ethics. And the trouble just to answer your question a little, is that at the moment there are over 180 ethical guidelines out there. So imagine if you're a tech company, there's no actual regulatory enforcement that you have to be ethical. And what people are trying to do is work around that. So we've all heard of corporate social responsibility. It's now moving into corporate digital responsibility. So go, what's the difference? It's the acknowledgement that what we use with our data and digital technologies moves across the social, the economic and the environmental. So the UN's directives, ESG, SDG. But what does that mean? And that's kind of still out to the jury to an extent. But I take your point, because when we're actually training computer scientists, so I'm in a business school, my main research partner is the head of computing, and we've collaborated for the last 7 years around this. What is trustworthy technology? What does ethical technology look like? And what is trust like on the social side? It's very different when you are a computer science engineer. There is different conceptualization of trust. It's within the parameters of machine learning tools, tuning those parameters within an acceptance range. And that is still subject to the engineer understanding what is ethical in this particular context for that data. Where has that data come from? Is it authentic? Has it been cleaned correctly? Does it include diversity? If we're looking at a diverse population, who will be the users? So these are all current questions that are being answered by a range of scientists and people like myself. But I would recommend, if you look on corporatedigitalresponsibility.net, that is a global group of like-minded people trying to come up with a mechanism, and anybody is free to join, to look at what these issues are. Because we have a major problem. I've sat on a lot of recruitment panels for top professors in computer science recently, and saying, how would you tackle a problem that still in the UK, and probably most of the major powers, the US, etc., that the recruitment to computer science degrees are white and male. So, unfortunately, what are they going to produce? They're going to produce something from their lived experience. They don't have that diversity of input. So there's people like myself trying to say we need voice at the start of this process, at ideation, to do ethics by design. But that is only starting to come into education. And I think all these points here are valid, but also the people who are not in the digital space. That's the big gap that I also champion in the UK around digital and financial inclusion, because, as you well know, the UK economically is not in a great position, and there are lots of people who cannot afford one of these. they can't afford a digital connection because they can't actually afford food. So we've got a bit of a problem anyway. I'm taking
Karen, there's also one issue. Do we trust computer scientists to be the...
No.
For ethics?
May I?
Yeah, am I going to trust Silicon Valley, Elon Musk, to be my ethics? Good luck with that. Sorry.
You mentioned, in one of your questions, you mentioned the term ecosystem. An innovation ecosystem does not only consist of innovators and users and investors, there's also a very important role, which is the role of an authority, the role of standardization bodies. So these questions, these concerns that we have nowadays with regards to AI, in reality, every new technology that was ever invented out there brought certain concerns. And they were always addressed by standardization and also the role of a regulator. Now, even though the EU AI Act has been discussed recently and prior to that, MDIA had already launched a program, TARF, that provides, it's on a voluntary basis right now, and then eventually it will be guided via the EU AI Act, so we will be in line with that eventually. But even though we're working on a voluntary basis, the idea is very simple, but I think effective. So you're looking at a black box as an end user. To me, the AI system is a black box. So what's in there? What is it doing? How can I have peace of mind? You can get peace of mind because through the TARF system, you can get a technical expert, so someone who actually understands what's going on, look at the system and verify that what is being done within that black box is not posing any harm to your rights, even to your health. So even when it comes to your question regarding privacy, there's regulation in place where you can store data and how to store data and consent to data. So I think it's important that we focus on the fact that there are regulators and standardization body, that they are there to make sure that everything that is being produced is within the safeguards our society.
So trust the regulation.
I come from a regulator.
Okay, so Neil, okay.
Is there time for me to respond very quickly?
Yeah. We'll be pointing 1 minute, but you can have 2 minutes. We can over. Yeah.
So Emma, thanks for your questions. I'm going to try and answer quickly. Based on your first question on ethics and AI, basically this is the biggest question we ask ourselves. If I create something with AI, is it mine? So basically, when we go to conferences abroad, Luxembourg, Brussels, wherever, we recently went to a conference, AI for Teachers, where they've completed a huge study on AI. And the teachers actually asked the experts, listen, what is the #1 training we need in AI? And surprisingly, media literacy is the #1 training that teachers should need when it comes to AI. And your second point, data collection. We currently teamed up with Microsoft and Google, where we're going to have access to the beta version of Google Chrome for kids, where nowadays kids are logging into their parents' accounts, which is already signed into their Gmail. We want to try and avoid that, and so I can't go into much detail.
Is Ian Gauchi allowed? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing hands rising. What do we do, guys? Do you want to throw us out?
We're already running a little bit late.
We're running late.
Maybe we can save these questions for the second panel. Okay.
Or perhaps they can ask them later.
Okay, so can I just stop? Okay, so you can decide what to trust. You can trust technology. You can trust regulation. I suggest you trust yourself and your education. It's up to you to get educated on this stuff. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, guys. If you want to grab a quick coffee, please do. We'll maybe start back in just a couple of minutes. Thank you. Hello everybody, we are going to start back, so if you'd like to take your seats, thank you so much. Ready for our second panel discussion. Okay, so we'll now begin our second panel discussion for this morning. So please welcome to the stage Chief Administrator of the eSkills Malta Foundation, Carm Kakia, Head FDI for Digital Innovation at Malta Enterprise, Melanie Dabatista, Senior Executive of Research and Innovation at the Malta Council for Science and Technology, Abigail Aquilina, Supercharger Ventures co-founder, Yanos Barberis, and to moderate the discussion, Chief Officer of Strategy Policy and Governance at the MDIA, Gavril Flores. Please welcome all five of them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope you are a bit more recharged after coffee. Back in 1995, there was this call of adding a new driver, a new dimension to the single market. So the single market is based on the goods, services, etc. And last week there was, I would say, quite an important report by Enrico Letta. He was Prime Minister, I believe, or President in Italy, Letta. And he presented a report to the European Council on the future of the single market. He took inspiration from Jacques Delors back in 1995, that now we should include another dimension of the EU single market. And the single market, as you are aware, is what makes us European. And it's to enhance research, innovation, and education in the single market. And this is, I believe, quite a new dimension to really create one of the core pillars of the EU: research, innovation, and education. A subject which normally is fully the responsibility of member states. How can we do that? And with us we have quite an interesting panel coming from industry, from research, from e-skills sector. And I would like to start with you, Yanos. So you lead an only EdTech accelerator in Malta and beyond. What do you see? What attracted you to Malta? And what do you see are the critical factors to make EdTech really Malta hub for EdTech?
So there was, it was really an organic journey, the way it started. Actually, one of the first beneficiaries, Taylor from Axon Park, there were two elements that were already in place, irrespective of Supercharger as an EdTech accelerator on the island. The first one, there was a regulatory difference in Malta, that Malta was the only place into the European Union, perhaps was one other jurisdiction an exception, where a startup or an organization can apply for a higher education license, which essentially is a university minus the research, and operate fully remotely. And this was done before us being here or before an EdTech ecosystem being talked. So there was a regulatory heritage that allowed to differentiate itself compared to other jurisdictions. So that's one basis. The second basis was what Malta Enterprise had done. Again, irrespective of an accelerator, there was a startup framework and there were startup incentive schemes, which were, in my view, one of the most transparent that I've seen, not just in Europe but globally, in the sense of you apply, you have a process for application, then you receive a letter of intent, and only if you receive the letter of intent can you choose to relocate in Malta and set up a company, which is quite different from most jurisdictions where you need to set up a company, do the admin, and then you submit the application. So there were those two bases. And then there was perhaps the element of an entrepreneur, which is, not the craziness, but the chance. We only operate in EdTech, but there is no such thing as an EdTech hub yet that naturally come into the mind of people. If you think, what is the hub of fintech, you would go London. What is the hub of AI, you could think Silicon Valley. When you think, what is the hub of EdTech, most people may say Oxford, but it's not correct anyway, so it could be anywhere. And so here there was the opportunity of, if we put the right framework, which is adoption, promotion, and selection, we might be able to turn Malta into a self-fulfilling prophecy on the back of success cases like Taylor coming from Axon Park, New Campus getting a university license, Doctorate Hub getting a university license, and then success brings success, and then the story creates itself. So that was the reason. There was a prerequisite that already was there. We just tried to connect the dots, coming externally, and then accelerate that going forward.
What is the process for you to select which, and the metrics which you use, and which startups to support, and maybe where do you see the potential?
So again, it's an organic journey because it takes time to build, but the first way we've approached on selecting companies were really based on operational need of a company to have a capacity to operate from Malta. So practically speaking, Malta has several schemes where a startup relocating is able to benefit from government incentives. Now, if those schemes and your operation allows you to therefore be in Malta, come to Malta and operate from Malta your business globally. Let me give you a very simple example. There's a company currently that we're talking to, I won't name them, but they primarily operated in the US. They now want to have a European client base. Therefore, they need to have a European office to cover that time zone. Doing it out of the US with the time difference would be complicated. Malta is a great location for them to do it operation. So it's not sexy, it's very practical, business use case driven. So we've done that for the first cohort with some success. We're doing that for the second cohort, but now for the third one, what we need to start looking at is the adoption side. So not just selecting from an operational use case and eligibility criteria perspective, but selected from a market demand side. So this is where we start to think about the idea of initiating a request for startups where stakeholders can say, here are the problem statement that we have, go find it. If there's a match, even better for them to be in the program. So that's the way we approach selection. But to give maybe a number, because people like number, for the Malta program, cohort 1, we got about 150 applications. Cohort 2, we got 220 applications. I cannot say the number of companies we selected for cohort 2, but selection is between, it's under 6%. So it's a very tough selection process. Yeah.
Thank you. Melanie, Janos spoke to us about the process that Malta Enterprise adopts to bring FDI to Malta. Maybe your experience in attracting such companies, especially in the EdTech field, and what makes companies select Malta as a hub.
So I believe that different sectors.
So I believe that different sectors have different USPs why they choose Malta, and even different companies would have their own reason why they choose Malta. As Janos was saying, a company which is operating from the US but want to target the European market, they need to be very mindful of the time zone differences that they need to work with. Very recently, we are in discussion with a company who is targeting mainly the Middle Eastern region, but they also want to tap into Europe. So they find Malta to be the ideal location for that, not only because of time zones, but also because we are very, very similar in the way that we are doing business. We find this to be also something which is very important to companies, that they can relate to us, that they can understand the way that we are doing business, and that they can understand the local landscape when it comes to speaking to different stakeholders, interacting with these stakeholders, and that is also something which a number of companies that we bring over to the island really value. They value the fact that you can speak to the regulator, you can speak to entities that are decision makers, and get to know the landscape within a couple of days. Essentially, they can understand what's happening on the island. And so that's also very important. I really like the term that was used in our previous panel, where they referred to Malta as an island lab. And definitely that is something which I believe we should really promote. Malta being such a small island, where you can interact with a number of stakeholders in a matter of days, I believe that does help to have Malta as a test bed for a number of companies, especially in education technology, whereby you are merging two very important sectors here in Malta, the education and the software side of things. So that's also something which, when we are attracting foreign investment into Malta, they are looking at. There are some examples, some success stories, which Janos mentioned, which also Neil mentioned in our previous panel, like Taylor, who's sitting here. But we also have other success stories which we are seeing evolving here on the island. And with an accelerator like Supercharger on the island, where we had a number of companies who have already gone through the first cohort, and now we're starting seeing them setting up in Malta. I believe that this sector is set to grow.
And how do you think we can look into the societal needs and educational needs and try to bridge between the two? So what the startups that what industry is creating and the local priorities and national priorities in the educational sector?
I think that is something which we as Malta Enterprise definitely promote and we try to assist in. But an accelerator like Supercharger is also helping it. Because what we do is we make sure that the EdTech companies that are coming over to the island, they meet with the local ecosystem. So they meet the regulators, they meet with key stakeholders, being the university, being the vocational college, to make sure that that we bring together the business side of things, the educational side of things, but also the community, which ultimately is what we are aiming to influence at the end of the day. So we meet with stakeholders on a very regular basis. We also organize a number of events in order for these stakeholders to come together, meet and discuss upcoming and new trends.
Thank you. Abigail, just yesterday we launched a 1.2 million fund pot for between MCST and MDIA to support digital innovation research. And I believe that MCST have a number of research funds which support and enable the digital aspect of research. So maybe you can elaborate a bit what MCST is doing in this regard and how you can make this bridge between what industry needs, societal needs, academia, etc.
Thank you, Gabriel. Exactly. So basically, as the Malta Council for Science and Technology, we encourage the researchers, the entrepreneurs, in order to seek for these funding opportunities, in order to take their ideas and then transform them into a market-ready reality. The digital sector can act as an enabler in itself and has a high potential for innovation. But also, when it comes, for example, to education, the health sector, it is also acts as a bridge in order to link this digital innovation. The Malta Council for Science and Technology has been operating now for several years. It has expanded, it has launched several schemes and initiatives, all for both the academia and also the public sector and the private sector, in order to tap into these funding opportunities and work on their novel technologies. When it comes to the R&I unit, we have Fusion, which is the national funding portfolio. We have these initiatives in order to take their idea, their scientific hypothesis, and transform it into something tangible and now even closer to the market. With the introduction of the Digital Technologies Program yesterday, now we are also seeking collaborations with other public entities in order to synergize and linking the expertise, the administrative capabilities of MCST as a research funding organization. But then also the technical expertise and the studies which they are carrying out and the numerous strategies and policies which they issue, linking them and come up with impactful initiatives in order to address their sectors. So with the digital technologies programs, we are addressing areas such as artificial intelligence, digital trust, quantum computing, to say the least. So with these opportunities, the community can take risks and hire personnel and work also on these projects.
So the idea that whatever you do in R&D has an element of risk. Everything in life has an element of risk. We had that question earlier on about using AI, for example. And most of the time it's about finding this benefit and risk balance. Karm, you have a very distinguished career in the skills field. And if we look a bit at statistics, back in 2017, I believe, the average, in Europe, the average digital skills of adults was around 37%, and in Malta we had an estimate of 52% having at least basic digital skills. Last Daisy, again Malta was higher than EU average, the EU was 54%, and in Malta we had 61% of the population having basic digital skills. Yet, what we're seeing that it's now the gap is, of course, everyone is moving on and it's becoming ever more increasingly challenging to bridge that gap. What, in terms of what e-skills is doing and what do you think are the critical success factors in this regard?
Hello. Okay. Well, e-skills, we are, the e-skills Malta Foundation is what's called a coalition of parties, and it's a national coalition and there is one in every country. And basically these coalitions, they have different stakeholders to work together to actually increase digital skills and ICT skills and other skills that are obviously complementary to that. As an organization, we tend to cover the gaps that exist, for instance, between industry and education. We still find, for instance, that the students are not let's say, prepared to work in the industry. So what we do, for instance, is we carry out a lot of extra curriculum activities and courses so that we bridge them so that when they are enter the industry, they are better prepared. We also organize a lot of, let's say, courses. We currently, for instance, have one with MDIA. It's a boot camp, tunnel boot camps with both MCAST and the university. It's based on innovative technologies as well. So, for instance, one of them is called Future Innovators, and targeting different groups. Before that, also the foundation has a very healthy boot camp. It's not summer, it's all year round. Last year we had around about 800 participants, which is quite good, and it comes from all ages. What we do, obviously, we see what is in the priorities nationally. For instance, we do notice that teachers need to be trained more. Students as well, but students, they have a lot of facilities these days at schools. But also we advise, for instance, we're talking about AI. I mean, of course, AI has become the top of the pyramid of everything that it's about the other emerging technologies. All emerging technologies will be affected by AI, of course. And for instance, implementing AI training and upskilling, and one has to be careful. Now, these things, sometimes certain stakeholders, it's not within their, let's say, portfolio to think about these things. But we obviously has the experience and the networking, what's happening abroad. And for instance, we know that the training and education needs to be equitable. Okay, there is a risk in, for instance, AI, that we increase the digital divide. Okay, we cannot implement training and education with tools that people don't know how to use. So we have to be careful that we need to address each sector. So you're talking about the society. Yes, the society has been 46% of the European, and also in Malta we're a bit better. They don't have the basic skills, okay? So when you're talking about AI knowledge and competences and skills, it is the same like the other, digital skills, okay? The only thing is that the AI, and especially the generative one, will affect everything that goes on, education, and we are moving on. We'd also help our founding members, like the Ministry for Education. We did carry out a project with them. I'm surprised that Neil didn't actually mention this, where we actually funded a pilot for schools to use actually, robotics in schools. Obviously, it was a pilot which worked, and obviously now, they will invest further to actually cover more schools and these things. These little things, gaps, the organizations obviously don't cover them, and we're a foundation that make this happen, basically,
So we spoke about lifelong learning, we spoke about different market segments, and one area which we touched upon is vulnerable populations. Maybe you can give some example of vulnerable population or vulnerable segments which you address through specific initiatives.
Well, first of all, we tend to use our funding as best as possible. Like, for instance, for the elder, we know that, for instance, there's FITA, who's doing an excellent job in upskilling the elders. So, although our let's say boot camps cover all adults, however, most of the attendants are actually those that are not elders. Okay, vulnerable, yes. We have let's say courses for refugees, or also refugees' children, actually, and also those that are not easily reachable, like in society, it's not just the elders. There are some where you need, for instance, events rather than courses. You need to, for instance, artificial intelligence, it needs to increase in the societies and vulnerable world. We need to carry out not just courses, but more awareness events, working with the local councils as well, and they give us, let's say, the position and the status in their localities, So we know, so we do target that. However, it's a group, I have to say, that is not very much readily, let's say, provided in Malta, unfortunately, and it's because of the attendance, not because there are not organizers. It's because they don't attend. So when you do something and you have 5 people instead of 60, then even the training providers will say, listen, this is actually not good for me, One thing, obviously, I liked what Katrina said before about the lifelong learning being a muscle that needs to be worked on, okay? So that's, for instance, is a little bit of a key. So we talk about, and he was talking about the, the people, the children don't ask enough, don't ask questions. So we need to work on that muscle. If we need lifelong learning, then we need to massage and teach the children from the very young that when they go home and when they have some time, instead of playing with computers, they see something which they learn. But you've got to give them time to it. Like they have the gym and physical education, it is the same. It needs to be worked on. Currently, the adults, the organizations, they tackle that with someone that are in nature. So if you go to the best companies, we are talking, previously I was talking with somebody, and the very good companies, they tell you, listen, you've got to spend 20% of your time training yourself, okay? Not after hours, because there's a work-life balance, which everybody talks about, but everybody forgets it then. you know. And those are the things that now, but if children are taught from now, they don't need to provide that actually, because they do it by themselves, the next generation.
Yes, I believe that, Alex mentioned his age, I'm 38, and I believe up to my generation it was the idea of a whole part.
I'm older than him, by the way, but...
Now, there's the part of, 18, you buy a car, you go to university, so there's almost a pre-established part. And today we're looking at, there's this variation whereby at one point in your life you are working and then you are in your 40s and maybe you start doing a master's or a PhD. So there isn't like this consistency, but in the sense it's a new reality, but it also gives us a new opportunity. Janos, maybe from your end, we were talking about the digital divide and also about this different aspect that education is not something which you do up to 25, but it's a lifelong learning process, and the process of investing in your education has at different points in your life. So how do you look at addressing or assessing startups which are thinking of addressing digital divide issues?
So there is so there's almost a policy level, and then there is an implementation level of it, right? So I think whether we take EdTech or FinTech or any vertical tech, the pace at which innovation has happened has increased dramatically to the point that now when you have innovation, technology and distribution, the rollout of new solution, like if you take ChatGPT before, but if you take at one point cryptocurrency, is almost instant. And the capacity, even for me, when I used to be for a very long time in FinTech and even in EdTech today, I still don't use ChatGPT on a daily basis. So the reason why I'm saying this is I am out of depth on some key area, and I know for a fact that me not using it, in 5 years I'm going to pay it dearly because I'm not doing it. But the issue is I can only focus on one thing, and right now I'm focusing on building the accelerator. I don't have time to do this, and I know that I'm going to be foregoing a skill. And I think this goes to your point around innovation cycles are getting shorter and shorter, distribution is going faster and faster, and then when everyone is playing catch-up, getting out of breath, and for a young generation, for the older generation, or even for policymakers, like what do we focus on? And at one point it will have to be an opinion. And it's right or wrong, but it's an opinion. That's why it goes to policymaking, which then brings it to the startups. We had an event 2 weeks ago, and someone asked me the question about, is it the role of startups to bridge that gap? And it might sound surprising from someone that doesn't accelerate and that is here to promote startup, but I think when you're looking at national level scale program of fitting a digital gap, it's not to be left for a startup. It is a decision of policymakers that are supported by a government, that is elected, that is voted, but I think leaving something so important in this context of skill and education to a private entity that is not elected as an official and a startup, we end up in a scenario with the Metas, the OpenAIs, where you have a few CEOs of incredible companies that can sway the world left or right, depending on where their interests are. And so the reason why I'm saying that is, I think startups play an incredible role of poking the bear and making people realize that change is needed. Startups are here to make organizations realize we need to transform, otherwise we'll become obsolete. And once that poking is strong enough, then those organizations start the internal transformation, use the distribution, start to roll it out. Now, it is tough for the startup because, okay, but what happens then when universities and corporates start to understand how to do innovation? Well, then startups are irrelevant. For the some startups that will have made it, they will become billion-dollar company, and that's incredible. For the other one that got acquired, they got a successful exit. And for the other one, they contributed in increasing customer benefit through the way of competition. I'll just give you one example. We don't have this yet in EdTech, but we have this, for example, in FinTech, and I just want to bring it. Most of you here are aware of the topic of challenger banks, right? The neo-online banks. There were hundreds of neo-online banks in the world globally. Most of them have closed down. Is that a failure or is that a success? It's perhaps a failure for the venture capitalists, but I think it's a success for us as consumers who now have a better banking experience all across because that competition drive has been doing. And so I think startups have that very good benefit, and that policymaker cannot disagree that competition is good for end consumer or end learners. Then is it for the role of startup to change at a national level a skill gap? Here I would be worried because then it means that it's privatizing a public good, which is education. And that's where I would perhaps limit the benefit of startups. At one point it stops from that.
But don't you see that there's also an opportunity for startups to address? So of course there's the government intervention, there's the educators, but don't you see it also as an opportunity for startups to, let's look at what happened in the higher education sector in Malta. There was a number of organizations which at the end of the day started higher education institutions. It can consider that as a startup too, and at the end of the day it raised, it helped in increasing the number of postgraduates, for example. So do you see that as an opportunity in this sense, so without minimizing the role that policymakers has and educators has?
So of course there's an opportunity, it's a question of scale. When does it become systemic? The moment it becomes systemic, I think it becomes a government mandate. And then when you talk about higher education institution, yes, there are private higher education institutions in Malta subject to a regulatory framework that harmonizes rules and regulation and quality of education and teaching, which therefore said, yeah, okay, private sector can play, but here are the rules. And that works. But then it goes therefore back to a policy level of what is the type of education that we want a Maltese license to hold in terms of quality. And so here's the qualification.
Thank you. Abigail, Melanie, both of you work in funding, and let's create a hypothetical scenario that we have this infinite pot of money. What will be the critical success factors for it to work?
So I believe that in order for a project to be successful, one, they have to think about the creative aspect in order to come up with something novel, something new. But in the meantime, they also have to form these collaborations because research doesn't happen in silos. So having these interdisciplinary projects which link different scientific areas together are going to create something which is impactful and is going to leave an impact at the end of the day in the market, on the end users, on society at large. So we have been mentioning different initiatives, and also we have a couple of projects that linked, for example, EdTech with health. So, for example, we have a project which was funded through a thematic program, a Smart Cities program called Sol City, that through the formation of a consortium, they linked the health aspect and also digital sector and education in order to come up with this device in order to help speech-language pathologists to assess and also come up with better instruments for the students and the kids in general. So having collaborations, we also encourage both at a national level, at MCST, but also at an international and at EU level. So apart from the R&I unit from where I'm coming, there are two other units which have funding opportunities at the Council. We have the internationalization unit who actually help forming international consortia through bilaterals and multilaterals. But then we also have the EU framework program unit who we host the national contact points to help potential beneficiaries. So whether they are coming from academia, from the public sector, startups, and large enterprises, to seek the advice and the support to fill in application forms and then eventually form consortia also at an EU level.
So you see then collaboration is the key success factor for ensuring EdTech success.
Exactly, definitely, because when one is going to collaborate, they are going to open this creativity box and also work together in order to come up with something which is going to leave more impact.
I believe that. Seems like it doesn't want to. So
At Malta Enterprise, I believe we value two very important things. One of them is innovation, and secondly, skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. And in order to ensure that we drive our business community towards these two very important pillars to us, we have also different incentives which we have put in place. If we look at the skilling, upskilling, and reskilling, we have a particular scheme which we refer to as skills development, whereby anyone that is in employment, if a company wants to train its employees, we can part finance up to 70% the training cost for that particular employee, and also the training cost of the training, the hours that they spend on training. So that is one way how we as Malta Enterprise are addressing this skills gap that there might already exist in the market. Apart from that, we also highly value innovation. We believe that innovation is coming from different sources, most of which is coming through startups. And in fact, we have also a number of schemes to assist startups. One of the most interesting ones is what we refer to as the startup finance scheme, whereby if a company is deemed to be highly innovative, then of course there are a number of criteria how we evaluate that, they can benefit from up to 1.5 million euros in a repayable advance, which if you had to compare it to what's available on the commercial market, I believe that's very advantageous. So yes, there are a number of criteria which make an EdTech company successful, and we as Malta Enterprise are trying to push companies in that direction by supporting them through a number of measures. One of them is hand-holding them throughout their process of setting up in Malta, but also by helping them financially through a number of funds which are administered by Malta Enterprise.
Thank you. Karim, last question to you. We speak about the evolving landscape in terms of the future of work. What do you see as the critical success factors to ensure the level of preparedness that we need?
Well, listen, skilling let's say, the tech-savvy nations, you know, everything is like a chain. So if you have a society that is well equipped with skills, digital skills, and then it will help for their employment. If the employers actually train their people, then you have a more tech-savvy nation. So it is, and this aim is for education. So the critical, I think, success factor is working on those things which contribute to failure that everybody was talking about this morning. The education system. Do we teach people, you know, to actually do lifelong learning, you know, starting from the very young age. There's clean tech, you know, so we have EdTech, we have FinTech, you know, clean tech as well. But we need to start, what is there more? I need to create another one. But, you know, we need to start young. And the critical success factor is thinking ahead and seeing the best practices that happen. We are an island physically, but we're not an island actually. A lot of failures happened somewhere else as well. So we need to get to know these best practices. We have, I mean, now it's been developed a digital skills and jobs platform where best practices can be seen there, and it's a one-stop shop where it comes to skills. So these are critical factors that we need to follow others, the good things that others done, but education is key. Well, everybody talked about education here and digital transformation and things like that. But, I mean, I feel that skilling is the last thing that they think about. The least portion of investment, and this includes the EU. If you see how much now it's starting to give more funds for skilling. But before, they are much less than, you know, the innovative technology and the other things. So I think we also need to train the trainers or the people who carry out mentoring of digital transformation. Most of the failures of digital transformation read everywhere and they tell you, yes, it's a human element. If you're going to do it and you don't involve everybody, then it will fail. But do we actually teach that to the companies? You talk to companies and you will do into digital transformation. They say, we bought a couple of servers, we've got the internet, they think technical. But it's not, it's a process. So these are critical success factors in having a nation which is actually, we're already not bad as regards, in the EU index and things like that. We're sixth, I think, which, in 27 countries, it's quite a feat, But still, when I see the leaders, what they are doing a little bit much more, an extra mile,
Okay, thank you, Carm. I think we can open the floor for questions.
If I may, just something briefly to add with Carm's comment. All our grants that we issue from the Malta Council for Science and Technology, we encourage people to recruit people to allocate a portion of the grant amount in order to have personnel, whether they are existing or new personnel, have students to work on the projects. Also through collaborations, maybe one can seek from technical experiences coming from the industry, and therefore upskilling and building capacity through these grants. We also do encourage it and entice it.
Yes, we have some questions from the floor. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself for the benefit of all and question, please.
So it's Edwin Zamit from MCAST. I'm a researcher and also an EdTech implementer. And I have one question for the panel. It's an open-ended question. How do you measure success? Something different entities, all having their agenda. Some of the entities might measure success as having more EdTech companies and so on. But to put into context to my question, I wanted to share even some experiences. And I wanted to also to see, I'm very happy to see that now EdTech is put in on the local agenda, so from a national level. But how shall Malta define its EdTech ecosystem? And I want to share my visions and my thoughts on the what, the how, and the why. So I will start with the what. So what is EdTech? And one can have various definitions of what education and technology is. Are we looking at the use of emerging technologies? A second thing, which technologies? We've mentioned XR, we've mentioned other technologies such as AI, but so far my feeling from today's session is that we're still at high level, and I think that the bridge to arrive to the class is very important. So that's another element. So we need to define our EdTech, what EdTech. Also look into mixing education technologies, mixing gamification with VR, looking into things like robotics, looking into things like assisted reality and other technologies such as telepresence robotics, amongst many other things. So how are we going to achieve it from a local level? I think one of the important elements, we've mentioned a lot of facets of the picture, but bringing it together is what is important from a national point of view, in my opinion. And I believe that it's time that now that we're sitting together, that maybe we have some hub, an innovation hub that is dedicated to EdTech, looking at innovation frameworks. Because it's one thing developing, and I'm very happy at Jan's intervention. It's not just creating EdTech for the sake of it, it's having the purpose of EdTech. And one of the things we need to look at is pilots. In earlier discussions, there have been a number of pilots happening here, a number of pilots happening in that class, a number of pilots happening there. But who is bringing them together? And that's my question. So, where does industry come into it as well? Are we looking at, ultimately, we're trying to future-proof our workers. So, elements of, for example, looking at today's industries. AI is being used by current industries, but what are the, in my opinion, we should preempt the needs of future workers. Finally, and most importantly, in my opinion, is the why. Why are we doing EdTech? And I'll finish off here. Are we doing EdTech because it's sexy? And my opinion should be is that let's not forget the et in EdTech.
Thank you. You reminded me of Gotthard's law, that when a target becomes a measure, it ceases to be a good measure. So we have a number of measures across the board. We have the digital decade target. We have the DESI prior to that. And when you look at country reports, we have measures which are also measured. Like, for example, what is the percentage of the population who is graduate in ICT, the percentage of women of ICT. So those are all very well established. But I think at the end of the day, the measure is what is the quality of life of the people. So it's relevant to have a lot of measures, but then the quality of life doesn't improve. So I believe, and then I will leave the floor to the rest of the panel, that the ultimate measure should be the level of happiness of people, the level of quality of life, the level of also free time available, because you can, put a lot of, so how can you find the right balance between getting the persons to actually learn, but also giving free time enough to enjoy what they are learning for. So I think, yes.
Let me start with the measurement. Obviously, we can measure or unmeasure everything, Even the happiness was happiness. But first of all, you've got to start with the official things that happen. We've got DESI, and we've got the digital decade, which in my view, obviously DESI was more focal, but there were targets that the Europe wanted to meet, so digital decade measurements are okay, I guess, especially for the bigger countries, which were not performing actually well when compared to other countries like us. But how can I say? You cannot measure certain things unless you have official reports, at the end of the day. I mean, that's my take from the... You talked about, yes, we have siloism in Malta and in everywhere. I think things are getting better, but a coordinated approach, national approach, which is very, very difficult in any case, is needed, because you need to find out what everybody is doing and how they connect. Even in education, last time I talked to Neil, there is the primary education, the secondary, the post-secondary, and the tertiary. All of them kind of complain, especially after the primary, that there is no connection with each other. So, when the tertiary get blamed many times, and it's not fair, because actually they get the students how they are produced. The secondary in a way as well. So there are a lot of things. I agree, I coordinated, fashion approaches. Actually. Yes.
I'll just go very shortly, because I think it's important how to measure success, because it will take time. So I think ultimately, if I just take that competition benefit of startups in EdTech, it's how is the population satisfied with the education system of their country, and how able are people to move from job to job in the workforce. I think it goes there. But I think what success is and what success is not is also important. setting up a company is a step two. It's a milestone. It's not a success. Raising money is a milestone. It's not a success. Getting a license is a milestone, not getting a success. At the end of the day, it's not emotional. It's whether there's a market fit and whether people are using your solution. And then there's a scale of it. But I think it's important that we can look at things like fundraising, incorporation, staff hiring, promotion, but these are milestones. I think that the ultimate success that you'll have is, are people satisfied with the education system at a policy level or an NPS if you're a startup or a company? And are people comfortable with changing the workplace at a country level and at an NPS on the level that they get? But I think often people consider milestones as successes. Like the good example is Usain Bolt doesn't celebrate when Nike is a sponsor. He celebrates when he won the race. And I think that's an important element on how to measure success, but therefore it takes time. And again, success is not a daily run, it's a career review of what you have done. Losing one game in a basketball championship doesn't mean you lose a tournament. And I think that's where people need to qualify success into milestones. It's okay to miss a milestone, it's fine. But you need to go through the long game.
From our end, from the Council's end, we want to create an adaptive system. So, for example, through Fusion, we have diversified our portfolio. Now we have around 12 schemes in order to address all technology readiness levels. So, when we have a startup, a researcher who taps into several funding from one opportunity to the next, in order to, for example, first work on early stage basic research, come up with a prototype, then seek further funding and actually take it closer to the market, this technology. And then we have schemes, for example, which are in collaboration with the Malta Development Bank in order to have a blended finance assistance. So from our end, we want to understand the research and innovation community. We have the strategy and the policy unit who actually meet stakeholders to understand better what is required, come up with the policies and also give advice and guidance when it comes to national research and innovation. And then implement what is required into different initiatives for research and innovation for creating this holistic environment.
If I could just nip in one second. Can I just quickly get an idea of how many questions we have left from the floor, please? So we've got one over there and one there as well. Sorry. Gabriel, I have a question, but I know you're about to speak, so it's okay if I...
Of course you
are. So the thing is, this morning we've heard a lot about different things. Some of them are quite abstract concepts, it seems to me. You know, particularly when we're talking about regulatory things, frameworks, milestones, things like this. But obviously one of the things we're here to talk about this morning is innovative, disruptive technologies in education. And I just wondered, really quick fire, maybe going down the line, everyone just give me one answer. What do you think, based on everything you know about Malta's education system now, okay, and I'm thinking really up to the education of people 18, with all the problems, funding, attendance, everything, the level of how prepared the classes are, what would be the most useful and beneficial and effective new technology, because that's what we're talking about, right? New technology that we can implement within the next year into schools. Because I think this is really important. You know, it's like the things you're talking about are important, but let's bring it down to a kind of a ground roots level. So maybe you could each answer.
For me, it's quite an easy answer because I believe start from a young age to teach students how to use generative AI. Because at least they would have an idea of what digital innovation is about. Probably by the turn, most probably, I'm sure that by the time they turn 16 or 18 it will be outdated. But at least a person will have a taste of what using the latest technology and what are the advantages are. So something very easy, something very quick. It's a quick one, but it will start ensuring that minds from young people are not averse to technology, but try new things. And if something else happens, if there is another new technology, try it out. Try it out. Try it out in a safe zone. Give space in schools also for students to try it out in a safe zone, but try it out.
Okay, thank you. Carl?
Well, I think you hit it right, actually. it will be a big failure if we don't obviously focus on the AI and the generative part. However, you cannot forget the rest, you know, I mean, IoTs and you know, the other emerging technologies, and even the current technologies. Even in education, we forget that basic tools that are used every day, Office 365 or spreadsheets, you know, are they being taught now in schools? You know, I mean, they will still exist in the next 20 years. So I don't think that, but generative AI and AI will actually is mandatory, I would say, is mandatory. And, you know, the digital literacy, the education system, the ICT people, the ICT sector, they know this and they are being, you know, let's say, try to handle it, you know. Yes, there are some roles that will vanish, for sure, you know, but other ones, like, you know, like before, others will emerge, other roles. So it's not, you know, we're going to lose jobs or something like that.
If I may add also, not just try it out, but think critically and think about the ethical implications. So one thing which we've done is connecting critical thinking and innovative technology. And I think, so try it out, but also think critically about what can go wrong and the implication.
Okay, thank you. And Janos?
For me, it's virtual reality. And the reason for this is it's magical. There's something magical that catches people's imagination and people talk about it. Generative AI or ChatGPT, you take a picture in a classroom and say, here are the students using ChatGPT, you go, but this is a regular classroom with people having laptops. You take a picture of a classroom with everyone having VR headset on them, it looks like you're in the future. And I think you need that level of, let's make people dream and trigger their imagination on something that is different. I think that using ChatGPT in a classroom is doing better education, not different education. I think that using VR in a classroom is doing different education. And I think the visual impact of in your face, literally having a VR headset, does not leave people without speaking about it. And so if we needed to do one thing, I would want people to talk about it. ChatGPT is kind of that hidden secret that you don't talk to your neighbor about, that you're using it on a daily basis. People won't say it. The student don't say it to their teacher, the teacher don't say it to their head teachers, no one talks about it. But you cannot hide the fact that you have a 1 kilo device on your head to learn about something. And I think this is why VR, it's as much a marketing stunt as a practical application, but I would look at VR.
Okay, thank you. Abigail?
From our end, we saw an increase in the number of projects in both aspects, so both in VR and also AI, as my colleagues have mentioned. So basically, when it comes for VR, we saw the implementation of VR, for example, in museums, in cultural heritage, in several sites, in order to help students of different ages to help them have a different experience when it comes to learning. When it comes to AI, then we saw the implementation of AI in all sectors. So if it's on the environment side, if it is also on the education aspect, so we believe that these two aspects are very, very dominant nowadays.
Okay, thank you. Melanie?
Maybe before even going into the technology, I would start from the fact that a lot of students maybe do not even know what the market requires. So you see a lot of gaps between what is being taught in the classroom and what is actually required by industry. At the moment, we are in touch with a company that is trying to bridge the gap. It's an EdTech company whereby they would speak with students, see what path they want to take, and match their interests with what the industry needs. Unfortunately, it is targeting high net worth individuals and people who can afford such services. But ideally, we try and get this kind of service for everyone to be able to use it.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for maybe just one more very quick question. There was someone over here. Yeah, okay.
So, good morning. Is it still morning? Yes. I'm Patrick Camilleri from the University of Malta. I'm a digital pedagogist. Yes, it was a very intriguing. I would like to say that it's very important that we learn to relearn to learn. What do I intend? I mean, it's very important that, yes, we skill or reskill to skill ourselves again, as Carl has said. And it's very important that we provide this raw potential, even within schools, for the teachers and the students to see how they can relate to the reskilling qualities and in the same time relate to what they're doing in schools. What do I intend to say? I mean, the idea is that, I mean, I'm a teacher trainer, or at least I try to be. Teachers believe that now that you're moving in this very deep gray area of artificial intelligence, then we have to forget anything that has to do with the traditional literacies. I don't agree. I mean, I believe that AI will not replace people, but people who work alongside AI will replace those who don't. So it's very important that if I intend to work, personally I don't work with ChatGPT, I prefer Gemini for various reasons. But if I intend to work with Gemini, I should be in a position to be capable of expressing myself what I want out of this large language model. So the traditional literacies are still very important. And that's why I'm saying we have to start reskilling even our students from a very young age so they are capable of relating the technologies with the traditional literacies. Why? Because ultimately they have to recognize the new potentials that we are not aware of. I mean, when the camera was invented, it didn't put painters out of a job. And when eventually the camera turned into a video, it didn't put the people who take photography out of a job. But it opened new horizons. And we became aware of new horizons once we reskilled ourselves. And the same thing when it comes to artificial intelligence. I don't like to use the word artificial, because ultimately it does things that we already do. That is why we have to learn how to relate with it. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, today when I go for presentations, people tell me, wow, what good presentations I have. I said, okay, I use, for instance, Gamma app to do the presentation. But before I do the presentation, I really consult deep with Gemini to explain to it what I want. So when people tell me, you're chatting all the time, I'm not chatting on WhatsApp. Actually, I'm chatting with Gemini, because it can give me things, and I can give it color and flavor with the qualities that make me human. Ultimately, I cannot do things better than the AI, but I have the qualities. First of all, I have sentience. I don't know if AI does have it. I mean, I have issues with Lambda, for instance, where it was put off the market. I did questions with Google, but never got an answer about it. But yes, we as humans have qualities, for instance, responsibility of what we're producing. Why don't you follow? Okay, creativity is very important, but technically creativity can today be done with AI. I have to be responsible of its content. Why do I have to be 30 plus to understand what responsibility is? Why can't I have this kind of skills even with young generation, where they're in a position to decide what they have to use in their own reality? So that's what I understand to talk about skilling and reskilling. I don't want to go deeper, but I mean, thank you very much. Thanks.
I think that's we need to now move to the key speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists behind me and the first panel as well. I'd now like to welcome the first of our two key speakers to close the event. First key speaker is CEO of the MDIA, Kenneth Brinkat.
Good morning, or I think good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking Times of Malta for organizing this event, which mainly consisted, if you have noticed, of public entities. However, in my opinion, today's event has highlighted the potential for deeper engagement and discussions about the EdTech sector. And in my opinion, there should be the involvement of other important stakeholders, such as academics, education institutions, students, educators, I mentioned them, tech industry, the tech industry, and large players in the tech industry. I think all of these have important views to share with us. So maybe this has been the first event about EdTech, or one of the first events about EdTech, but I'm sure there will be others with the involvement of other stakeholders that I mentioned. Undeniably, personalized learning environments and growing economic opportunities shape a promising future. It's also important to consider the potential challenges that may arise with the adoption, as we have mentioned, of disruptive technologies like generative AI. Thanks to the pursuit of unbiased information that is becoming increasingly available, it presents a critical opportunity to shape the transformations needed within our educational and technological ecosystems. This knowledge will empower individuals of all ages. We've heard not just young generations, but also old generations, to become mindful participants in this digital era. Through these insightful discussions, we have acknowledged both the challenges and the immense potential EdTech presents, and by fostering collaboration and the commitment to knowledge acquisition, we can equip everyone with the tools needed to not only navigate, but thrive also in this evolving digital landscape. So, they told me to be short, and I'm short, and I would like to thank you for your participation in this enriching discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. We'd now like to welcome the CEO of Malta Enterprise, Kurt Varusha. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you to the Times of Malta, thank you to all the attendees. And if there was one thing that we've been discussing all morning is actually the change that we are going through in technology, but also through the changes we've been going through, the changes that we are seeing in the economy and our economic model. Malta is moving up the value chain, transforming its economy into one that is more knowledge intensive, less labor reliant, and transitioning towards more value adding activities. That was our focus as Malta Enterprise during these past few years, particularly in our foreign direct investment attraction efforts. Our factories nowadays look more like laboratories or software companies than actual shop floors. The transformation of our manufacturing sector is trailblazing. For instance, one of our most traditional manufacturing companies, which makes rubber sealing solutions, will be producing sealing solutions that will go into machines that make the most advanced microchips in the world, and they will be leaving from Malta. We will also have one of the most advanced microchips back-end operations in Europe through a project approved by the EU Commission under the Important Projects of Common European Interest. Our economy will not need more people, but smart people with the right skills. And that is where EdTech comes in. So the question I would like to put forward is whether our education systems are keeping up with the economic development that is going around us. We need more skilled people, more engineers, more scientists, more mathematicians, more data analysts, more software and coding experts. We need more girls choosing STEM subjects and more women taking leading roles. Our economy is heading in the right direction, but it is high time we start focusing on the education we are delivering in our classes to ensure that the skills that are needed for the workforce match what is actually being taught in our classes. And I was very pleased to listen to Neil Attard earlier, who was speaking about the government's education digital strategy. I think it's the right way forward and also the right questions being asked. And it is about time that we start going into more detail on such debates and discussions. And that is why today's topic matters now more than ever. We need to future-proof teaching methods as the way and also the way our children are being taught. And we can do this through technology. So basically, I started my journey to learn more about EdTech by meeting Janos and Taylor, who were both here this morning, when I took up my role as CEO. Of course, a few months later, COVID struck and the education industry had to undergo major changes, especially in the mode of delivery. That is the point where technology, particularly in education, became pivotal in this whole context. So in the midst of the pandemic, Malta Enterprise had identified EdTech as an important sector for growth, and through our investment promotion unit, we started targeting EdTech companies wanting to explore the opportunities that Malta has to offer, as Melanie was mentioning earlier during the panel discussion. A few months later, we started conversations with Supercharger Ventures to set up their first EdTech accelerator in Malta. In total, until now, we have attracted in the region of 30 companies that are going through the accelerator program. Some of them are actually establishing their operations here in Malta, applying for local opportunities such as our own incentives at Malta Enterprise. One might think that the EdTech industry is just software, but there is also the hardware element, which is very important and something which I would like to touch upon this morning. In our small jurisdiction, in fact, we do also impact EdTech through our hardware contribution. Evidently, there is no EdTech and devices without microchips. Most of the devices that we use in our schools and that are on your tables have microchips that are shipped out of Malta straight to your devices and the devices we are using in our classes. So our semiconductor sector is very much linked with European and global value chains involved in automobile and telecommunication activities. As Malta Enterprise, on behalf of the government, we are taking the opportunities that stem out of the EU's CHIPS Act very seriously. Already mentioned our participation in IPCEI, we are also seeking to capitalize on the possibility of obtaining EU funding to establish a Malta Competence Center for Semiconductors. To conclude, what is ahead of us in the sector of EdTech? Artificial intelligence is due to open a new era of EdTech, EdTech 4.0. AI has the power to personalize learning to the needs of the user. This is a revolution for the future of education and work, and we as a country, particularly looking at opportunities that are ahead of us, should harness such opportunities. This trend is the wind of EdTech. However, we need a sail to catch the winds and raise the ecosystem. For this to happen, we need not just a supply of EdTech trends, but we need these solutions to be adopted by users and shared. We need our classes, our institutions to start using these technologies, and this requires a change in our own behaviors, which, as we all know, is the hardest part. but we know that change is with us and is coming. The trend is in its infancy, but we need to remain ahead of the curve. I hope this conference was a good starting point today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's Business Breakfast, hosted by Times of Malta in collaboration with the MDIA and Malta Enterprise. All of those who are online, thank you for watching as well. And just before we go, I'd like you to join me in thanking all the panelists and speakers and moderators for their time. Thank you.